Okay, so the handout that I emailed to you is a few websites that I recommend for people just starting out doing genealogy research. The first one on the list is the free website for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, also known as the Mormons. And my plan is in July to do a class just on the Mormon church records, because there's a lot of different aspects of this website. And when you go to the website, just to show you real quickly, you'll set up an account. And this is their homepage right now. And up across the top are the different sections with family trees, searching historical records, and other aspects of the site. But the one that people use the most is the records section. And we'll just take a quick look at it. So here is where you would search their historical records. You can do it by clicking on the map or just starting with your ancestor's name. And just as an example, if we went to New York, and scroll down, these are just some of the collections about New York State that are available on Family Search. And this website is always free, so you can use it from home at any time. Now, the second one I have here is the Ellis Island passenger list website. And next week, I'd like to do part of the presentation on this website, plus other websites that have passenger list information. And again, you could just very briefly, I'll put in one of my relatives, and here on the first screen, it gives you the date that the ship arrived, the name of the ship.
Wow.
And yeah, the ship manifest, a picture of the ship if they have it, and the actual passenger record. But again, you're going to have to create a username and password. And then, then you'll be able to see, like, here's the photo, more information, and passenger list image. Well, you're supposed to see the image. Oh, here it is down below. And then you can blow it up as you're looking at it. But we can go into this in more detail next week with passenger lists, and also I want to talk about military records. But you can see on his passenger list, for example, it gives his home address and also his naturalization date. And we had looked at these briefly the last time as a source of information for naturalization records. Now, US Gen Web is a free site that's run by volunteers. And on here, you can go to any state. And from here, you can also go to a particular county. So if we went, say, to Suffolk, then it takes you to all this information that's been gathered by volunteers having to do with Suffolk County. And you can see off to the side, they have things like newspapers, churches, societies, military records. So sometimes the pages on this website have unusual collections that you may not always find on some of the bigger websites. You know, they've got wills, Suffolk County wills down here that go back to colonial times. So it's always good to take a look at these pages also. Okay, these two genealogy groups, the Italian genealogy group and the German genealogy group, both have database collections that are free for you to search. We looked at the German group last time a little bit because they have naturalization indexes. And if you go over here to database searches, you can see all the different types of records that they have. And these are indexes, not the actual records themselves, but birth, marriage, and death records, cemetery records, church records, military, naturalizations. And most of these are dealing with New York City and Long Island. Oops. Let me just, sorry. I'm not sure. I thought I saw, okay, sorry. I thought someone else was trying to get in the meeting. Okay. Let me go back. Okay, over here we have the Genealogy Federation of Long Island. These are the local groups that meet once a month on Long Island. We've got the Italian groups, Irish group, German, Huntington Historical Society, DNA group, African Atlantic Genealogy Society. Of course, right now nobody's meeting in person because of all the restrictions, but two of the libraries have been doing virtual programs. And so those are listed here on the upcoming events and on the monthly calendar. So the Patchogue Library and the Brentwood Library both have been doing programs, virtual programs during June, and they were doing them in May also. Normally, the clubs meet once a month. You can pull up an old calendar. So normally, the calendar would look more like this, but this was in March when we had to cancel everything. So it's definitely worth taking a look to see what's going on. You can go to meetings, you don't have to be a member. And if you decide to join any of the groups, it's usually between $15 and $25 for the year. And Cindy's list is a collection of web links that are arranged by category. So if we wanted to go again over to, let's just pick a country. So it would show you the web links by category. And if you're researching an area you're not familiar with, this is a good place to look to see where you might start to do your research. And you can see here, they're linking you to the family search page that we were just on earlier, showing that they have Norwegian baptism and marriage records. And this one up here is a pay site. But Cindy's list has been around a long, long time, and it's very popular with everyone, not just beginners, but even people doing more advanced research. Okay, this This link is really helpful if you're not sure where to find vital records in a state maybe you're not familiar with researching. Say we go to New Jersey, it'll show you the website to go to for the records. It gives you the cost, the address, and if you go down to the bottom of the page, you can see the last time they updated the information. So I always like to check down here to see what the last date was, because obviously information and prices can change, but at least, you know, this always gives you a good place to start. Find a Grave, again, is another free site. It was bought by Ancestry several years ago, but it's still free. And this is all done by people, by volunteers who input their family information on here. Here are some of my relatives that I put up on Find a Grave. Here's my grandmother, my uncle, great-great-grandmother. And then I have her linked back to her parents and to her husband. And if you're not sure where somebody was buried, this is always a great place to start looking, because this is still, this site's been around a long time also, and it's still very popular. Okay, and I put in this link to the National Archives in New York City, who of course are closed right now, but here's their contact information. I've always heard that if you email them, they really try to respond pretty quickly to people's questions. So, you know, I've always heard positive things about the staff that work there. And they have some information here about planning your visit, frequently asked questions, you know, about the types of records they might have there. So they have passenger arrival records, naturalization records, court records. So this is a good site to go to before you would plan a trip there. This way you could know if they have what you're looking for. And over here, it shows you the area that this office covers. They only have records for New York, New Jersey, Puerto Rico, and the US Virgin Islands. So if you're looking for, let's say, Pennsylvania records, you would need the National Archives that would cover Pennsylvania, or Connecticut records are in Boston. Okay. And then last on the list here is a link to New York Public Library. So you can get an idea of what type of collections are at New York Public. And again, they also have a plan your research visit link. You can email them. And these other links give you an idea of what's in the collection, the types of things you could find in the microfilm room. And they also have these digital collections that you could look at home. They have all kinds of interesting things in here, like these old photographs, the scrapbooks. And I even saw this one, apartment houses of the Metropolitan. So this is always fun to look at. So let's close out of some of these. Okay, so on our website, if you go over to eResearch and we scroll down to genealogy, the first thing we're going to run across is Ancestry. And until the end of June, you can still use Ancestry from home. I don't have any idea if they're going to extend it past the end of June. So I would use it now because the remote access probably will go away at the end of June. After that, you can only use Ancestry here in the library. So what I wanted to take a look at today in Ancestry was birth, marriage, and death records, because we haven't looked at those yet. So over here in search, we can just go to birth, marriage, and death, and we'll put in my relatives. And I always like to click the exact and similar button. And this will give you an idea of some of the types of records you might find. So if we go over to birth records, one of my more unusual ones for my family is this top one. It's a report from the U.S. Consulate office in Paris about the birth of one of my relatives' children. So this is a report of birth of children born to American parents. And it's really pretty interesting, I thought. It gives his parents' name, his parents' birthplace, what his father did for a living, where he was registered as an American citizen, the information about his mother, who is not American, signature of his father, and that this was done at the American Consulate in Paris. Then we have, I have a lot of cousins in Minnesota, and you can see that the Minnesota Birth Index is available up to 2000. And these happen to be my cousins' children for the most part. And then go to the next page. Then we also have a New York Birth Index. And this happens to be my aunt. And if you go to look at this, so there's my aunt, and it gives you her birth date and her birth certificate number. And up here on the top, you can see that this is for Brooklyn. She probably doesn't even know that people can see this. And this is my mother right here. I'm sure she doesn't know that either. And this is my cousin, but you can see his name is spelled wrong. His first name is James, not James. Okay, and there's also, though you don't have an image here, this is an index to birth certificates. And on this one, I found it interesting because even though you can't see the index itself, it tells you the occupation of my great-grandfather. And you don't see that in the other records we were just looking at. And it also gives you his wife's name, and that my great-grandfather was born in France. And but this is the child that the birth certificate is for. But it's nice to pick up this other information without even having to have a copy of the birth certificate itself. Okay. So if we go now over to marriages. Okay, so we also have, sorry, a New York marriage license index. So this is only,
I'm busy.
oops, this
I'm
is
gonna-
only,
Power washer. Okay?
this is only the index, and these are for marriage licenses. So that doesn't mean the person necessarily got married, but this is the date they applied for the license. So you have to be careful that you don't confuse that with the actual marriage certificate date. And again, my cousins from Minnesota show up here with marriages from the Minnesota marriage system, which go all the way up to last year. So you can see by state, it really varies a lot about what's available online. So we have Minnesota. This is my parents. And even without clicking on the image, you get my father's name and my mother's name. But where it says Hempstead, New York, they weren't married in the village of Hempstead. They were married in the town of Hempstead. In fact, they were married in Garden City. So if you're not familiar with the area, someone else might think that they were married in the village of Hempstead when that's not true. So you need, sorry, you need to be familiar with the location you're researching, or you might end up with incorrect information. There was another one, I think it's on the next page. Okay, then I also wanted to show you that this relative of mine was married in England, and this does show up in this Ancestry Library edition, even though it's from another country, because the Ancestry Library edition does have records from outside the US. And I'm not sure if everybody is aware of that. Okay. Now, in this index, it doesn't give her husband's first name. And for a long time, I had no idea where this woman had gotten married until I ran across her in one of these indexes, because no one knew that she had been married outside of the country. And I also have, and here's another relative who was married in Washington, D.C., and it's got his spouse's name also and the marriage date. So let's move on. Okay, to death records. Okay, so my uncle served in the military, and so he shows up in this Department of Veterans Affairs death file. And these are helpful because they give you the enlistment date of the person and their discharge date and what branch of the military they served in. Then we also have, there's a newspapers.com obituary index in here, the Social Security Death Index, which is for one of my relatives. It gives you their death date, where their Social Security card was issued, and their birth date. There's also a link to Find a Grave, which we looked at earlier. We have the Florida Death Index. A lot of New Yorkers moved to Florida, so I found quite a few relatives in this collection.
Hi, Nancy and Trophy calling.
Oops.
Hi,
Sorry,
did
could
Dr. Miller receive the information I sent about the blood results?
Could you mute your mic,
Okay,
please?
do you think that she'll look at it and have an opinion on it today?
Oops. Sorry about that. Let me go back. Oops. Okay. Florida Death Index. Okay. All right, so let me just go back to the search button just to show you real quick about the different countries. So this, if we go, let's say to Europe, if you click on any of these locations, you'll get a listing back of some of the collections that are available in Ancestry Library Edition. So for Denmark, you can see we've got baptisms, marriages, immigration indexes. So if you're interested in searching other countries, you know, I would definitely take a look at the map first and see what they have, so you know whether or not the information you're looking for is available on Ancestry or not. And of course, they cover really all around the world. And depending on the country, sometimes you'll find a lot of records and sometimes they don't have quite so much. Okay. So the next thing I wanted to go over was this Ancestry.com New York. So if you click on this, it's going to take you to the New York State Archives website. If you scroll down to view records online, you'll see Ancestry.com New York. If you put in your zip code here, okay, it's going to take you to this page. And this is just New York records. We'll scroll down. Anything you see here, you can search at home without having to go to the library, Ancestry Library Edition. These are always available for you to search at home for free. And they were provided by the New York State Library, the New York State Archives, and these other institutions. And so this is just a subgroup of records that are always going to be available to you at home, and probably the ones that are popular, I guess the more popular ones are these New York State census records, because New York State had a census roughly every 5 years up until 1925 when it was stopped. But this way, you can always look at these from home without having to come into the library to use Ancestry. Now, Heritage Quest is only available in libraries, and this you always have access from home. And what they had been, the US Census Record Collection is a big draw to Heritage Quest because you can search this from home. The other interesting thing they have is these local history books. And let me give you an example. Oops, sorry about that. I found one of my relatives in this book about industries and wealth of Brooklyn. And it was quite interesting because they had a profile of him in this collection over here. And another relative also showed up. In a list of registered voters. So you never, know what kind of items you might find in here. But the one thing that seemed to be a bit of a problem was when I tried to limit it just to a location, I found that the best way to do it was to go down to keyword and put the location in quotes and then search for someone. I'm not quite sure why it behaves like this, but if I just wanted to see if there were any records for a relative on Staten Island. That seemed the way to get, see at the beginning of the searches now, I'm getting books about Staten Island that just list his name. And Heritage Quest, let's go back. Okay, Heritage Quest also has a link to city directories. So here are some of my relatives, and it gives you obviously their name, the year, the location of their residence. Well, and you can actually see the phone directory itself. And so there's my grandfather's business address in the city in 1960. And we can actually, if we just put it exact. Okay, so 69 results came back. And I know these are all my relatives because the last name is rather unusual. But this is a great way to trace where your ancestors moved from year to year, especially since right now the last census records that are available are from 1940, and these directories you can see actually go into the late 40s, the 50s, and even 1960. Okay, and there are also a few other things on here like census map guides, Canadian census records, and Revolutionary War records that you can search. And this section here just takes you back to that Find a Grave page we were on before. Ancestry also basically owns Heritage Quest. So some of the information on here is also on Ancestry.com. Oh. Now I wanted to show you some of our historical newspapers that we have. And again, all of these you can get from home. So if we go into Historical News Day, just have to put in your card number. And then what's good about this Historical News Day, and the same thing with Historical New York Times, if you go into advanced search here, you can limit the type of articles that you see. So you could actually just say, I only want to see marriage records, I only want to see obituaries, and they give you a lot of choices. So if we click those, so now I'm only getting marriage announcements and death notices. Okay, this way. And my mother's mentioned as being in a wedding party at this marriage. And this is my parents' engagement announcement. And we have This is actually my uncle's death notice that appeared in Newsday. You know, or you can just, you know, unclick these and so if I just searched in general, I actually found an article about one of my aunts, the life and times of North Shore Club women. And my aunt was picked up, this is my aunt, and it found her name mentioned in a photo caption. So you can find some interesting things out about your relatives searching the papers. And again, if we went to historical New York Times, you could do the same thing where you can restrict the types of records you see. Or you could just do a basic search. And in here, there's actually an article about my mother's cousin participating in a tennis tournament. He's down here. But you know, they pick him out in the, I guess it's like the box score of a tennis game. Okay. Now we also have more contemporary newspapers. We also get New York Times 1980 to current. We get the current Newsday articles, and we also have Wall Street Journal. This one over here, this picks up newspapers from different parts of the country. And I actually found an obituary in Chicago in here. So there's a death notice for one of my relatives in Chicago that shows up. And also my relatives that are in Minnesota and Kansas show up in some regional newspapers that normally I wouldn't even think to look for, but they show up in this database. So you never know where you're going to find your relatives mentioned in newspapers, and it's always interesting to find these little pieces of information. Sorry, I lost to go back here. So also down under newspapers, we have the New York State Historic Newspaper website. This is run by the Empire State Library Network. And this is obviously these are local newspapers from New York. And you can find some interesting, again, tidbits about your relatives in these papers. So I'm going to try my relatives who lived out in Suffolk. And with this website, you can change the results so that you can sort them by date order. And that's usually how I like to look at them. Let's see. Just wanted to show you a few examples from this. So up here, it shows you which newspaper the information's from. And then if we blow this up, okay, oh, sorry. So in this case, we have Mrs. Arthur Engren spent several days in Brooklyn last week visiting friends. And then Arthur Engren has been home for the past 2 weeks on his spring vacation. So the smaller papers back then really had a lot of detail about the comings and goings of people and who they were visiting, who was sick, who was getting married. We have here Mr. and Mrs. Charles Engren and daughter Anna of Brooklyn were weekend guests at Arthur Engren's. So this gives you a clue, if you didn't know, that this other couple had children. Now, just from this one article, you know that they had a daughter, Anna. Okay, also, let me go. Same family. We have a private Thomas Engren enjoyed the past weekend with his parents. So now we see this is October 1942. So now we have a clue that their son Thomas enlisted in the Army during World War II. And again, maybe you didn't know this, but from these newspaper articles, these are the types of clues that you can pick up. And then just one more example from this family. Sorry. Okay, and then here, Arthur D. Engren of Green Lawn, who died March 6th, with the value of estate of about $1,300. All personal property was left to his widow. So again, from this now, you know that Arthur died March 5th in 1944, and that his wife, Jenny, was still alive when he died. And this could lead you back to probate records in Suffolk County. And on this website, you can search, all locations just by county. You can even limit it by cities. You can limit it by a particular newspaper. So it gives you a lot of choices when you do your searching. And over here, it should also be giving us the list of newspapers that's included. And you can see now they're up to over 10 million pages on this website. Okay, okay. And so here you can see the newspapers in the collection. And this is really helpful because it also shows you the earliest edition they have and the latest, so that you know whether or not whether these particular papers would be helpful for you in your searching based on the years that are in the collection. Okay, now I was going to show you one more newspaper website that's not on our homepage, but the Brooklyn Eagle online newspaper has been really helpful when I've been doing family research in Brooklyn. And this is, sponsored by the Brooklyn Public Library. And these are the years that are available on the website. I had so many relatives in Brooklyn, and I found quite a few obituaries in this. I found real estate transactions, court cases. And depending on the year, Brooklyn didn't just include Kings County, but you can also find information about people who lived in Queens or Nassau County in here, because this paper covered a large area for many years. But just as an example, this is the death notice for my great-great-grandfather from 1912. You know, and where the funeral services were going to be. And we also had an obituary for one of his grandsons. This man died in Huntington, but it appeared in the Brooklyn paper because they had lived in Brooklyn for many years before they moved out to Suffolk County. So even though he wasn't living in Brooklyn anymore, they still ran a rather large item about his death. Okay, and then one more thing I wanted to point out on our website, back in the genealogy section, is that I've been working with the West Hempstead Historical Society to put information up on West Hempstead local history. And if you hit Explore Collection, I wanted to just show you some of the items that we have on here. We have things about some of the local businesses. We have information on historical homes in the area. Businesses, sports events. Here's Cherry Valley Shopping Center, Chestnut Street School. The Historical Society had quite a few class photos that we were able to scan. We have Halls Pond photos, some of the more famous residents in West Hempstead. So if you get a chance and want to take a look at it, we have the fire department, again, and all the elementary schools, the high school. Even some farm photos. So it's been quite an education putting some of these up online and learning a lot about the background of West Hempstead. Oh, postcards from Hempstead Lake State Park, etc. So let me stop this. Does anyone have any questions about what we went over today?
I have one question, Jean. How do
Sure.
I look up a newspaper from 1956 on the weather? They said the weather was so bad that year. I'm just curious just to see.
Well, I mean, you can go to look at that historical news day.
Okay.
You can pick a date and just
Browse
kind of
through
look
it.
through the paper. Yeah,
Right.
I mean, we have Newsday that goes, and New York Times goes back to that too, but you'd probably want Newsday.
Okay, thank you.
Or even, that New York State Historical newspaper
Oh.
site. You could
Okay.
pick a newspaper in Nassau County and see if 1956 is one of the years,
Okay.
that has, and they may have articles too.
I was just curious.
Yeah, no, you can check a couple of different places.
Okay, thank you.
What was so bad about the weather?
My mother couldn't get to the hospital to give birth to me.
Okay. Well, so now you know you want to look at Newsday by that date.
Right.
And then, yeah, find which page the weather was on.
Because I'm hearing it through all my family, and I'm saying, I gotta find that article.
Yeah, no, try Newsday first, maybe. That might be the easiest.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Okay, and like I said, next week I want to do passenger lists. We'll look on Ancestry, but also other websites, and then look at information on military records and where those are kept. I mean, Ancestry does have those, but there's other places we can look. And then hopefully I'll have a little time to pull up my Ancestry DNA results, and I can show you a little bit about Ancestry DNA. Because usually when I do these classes in the library, the first thing we talk about is, oh, have you done your DNA test? And most everyone has. So I thought, well, I don't mind showing off my DNA and explaining a little bit about the results page and what it looks like. And so I thought I would throw that in too. And then in July, I believe it's July 21st, I scheduled a class just to look at the Family Search website and explain the different parts of that. So that's what I've got coming up. So I hope you all will come back next week. And even if you have time to sign up for the class in July. And maybe by July, who knows? Maybe we'll even be allowed to have some people in the building by then. So, and if everyone doesn't know, you can do curbside pickup now at the library for items. You can either call us at the reference desk or you can place your orders through the online catalog. So, okay, so I hope I see everybody next week.
Thank you. It was a great
Okay.
class. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.